Hello, everyone. On behalf of IBM Systems Magazine, I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. My name is Janine Donnelly. I am the manager of webinars for IBM Systems Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You can ask a question at any time during the event by entering it into the Q&A panel. If you experience technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the Q&A panel to alert us and someone will assist you. You may download a PDF version of the slide deck by clicking on the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources on the left side of your screen. Today's webinar, IBM Modernization and Optimization, is sponsored by Ensono and Fresche Solutions. Today's featured speakers are Steve Lord and Chris Koppe. Steve is a 13-year veteran of Ensono with experience in systems engineering, architecture, and now product development. As Senior Manager of Product and Technology, he is Ensono's product leader for infrastructure and IBM services and products. Chris is Senior Vice President of Transformation and Modernization Services at Fresche Solutions. Chris is widely recognized as a thought leader in IT strategy and modernization and is a regular speaker at conferences, events, and on webinars. Today, Ensono and Fresche Solutions partner to show you how to revitalize your IBM for mission-critical systems and to deliver increased value to your business well into the future. With our introductions complete, Steve, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Great, thanks, Janine. Hello, everyone. As Janine mentioned, I'm Steve Lord, and I'm the product manager for our IBM service at Ensono. Real quick, I wanted to give you a snapshot of Ensono. We are a managed services provider, and we've been in business for about 47 years, catering mainly to the mid to enterprise-sized companies. We provide expertise and execution that makes an immediate impact for our clients. This includes complete hybrid IT services from cloud to mainframe and IBM, with a philosophy of right workload at the right place at the right time, and in your data center or in ours. We use our Ensono MO platform to manage this workload across your Power Systems, VMware, and public cloud environments that allows our engineers and clients a single view into their systems wherever they are located, all wrapped up in a client-first philosophy. As you can see, we manage a fair number of systems for our clients that range in industries from healthcare to manufacturing, logistics, insurance, and finance. We offer OpEx-based solutions that gives our clients the agility to scale up or down as needed at the performance levels needed to run their business. This was some quick info about Ensono. Now, Chris, how about Fresche?
Thanks, Steve. So this is Chris Koppe, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Transformation and Modernization at Fresche Solutions. Fresche is a company focused on IBM application modernization and application management. We've been in business for over 40 years, have thousands of customers all over the globe, and are very proud to maintain that degree of customer satisfaction and happiness globally. Our solutions focus on a number of areas ranging from application modernization to application management. The tools and solutions include things like web and mobile enablement products, language and database modernization and transformation tools and services, application support, all kinds of service solutions around helping customers transform and modernize, reporting solutions, and a variety of others. So again, innovative products and services focused on a number of areas, all centered around modernization and helping customers maximize the benefits of their existing investments in IBM apps. Steve, back to you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to start off discussing why IBM needs to be connected to the modern data center and how this sets the foundation for Chris's half that focuses on application optimization in the modern world. There are a lot of challenges, as you can see here, that I'm sure many of you are facing that as a whole looks a bit daunting, but they can be chipped away one piece at a time. Most of the issues here are around viability of IBM and its use in the data center and lack of understanding of the value it brings the business. But why is that? Now put yourself into the shoes of the business application owner. How are IBM systems integrating with the modern data center and a cloud-first mentality? It used to be for standard Windows and Linux systems that everything goes on VMware and that you need to prove to the CIO that it needs to be a physical server. Now it's starting to be a cloud-first mentality. Now think from the CIO's perspective on their need for getting data to the business side and getting different systems talking to each other to get this data. Digital touch points are permeating every aspect of your customers' lives, resetting their expectations to a higher level each time they're exposed to a better digital experience. These expectations come from industries that offer great customer experiences, such as online stores and online banking. And as a result, digitally savvy customers increasingly expect their own internal IT teams to meet their real-time information needs whenever, wherever, and on whatever device that's convenient to them. Applications and systems that cannot meet these expectations are ripe for replatforming because the CIO must deliver on what is needed for the business. So you have to ask yourself, how are my IBM systems integrating with the modern data center and a cloud-first mentality? First, I think it's safe to say it's always about the money. CIOs are faced with flat budgets, but they still need to develop for the business. And instead of tying down capital on infrastructure and on ideas that may or may not work, they are looking for cloud solutions that enable them to be fast, flexible, and deliver on the digital experience end users expect. I think we can all agree that technology has fundamentally changed both how we live our lives and our expectations. Technology we have today is, it's crazy compared to even 10 years ago, and the rate of change is just increasing. The ability to make a transaction immediately, to expect instant and personal response, to be able to demand personalized services at any time across a multiplicity of devices has really set customer expectation levels that defy belief when compared to only a decade ago. To survive and thrive in this modern world, organizations have to deliver consistently great service. Failure is quite simply not an option. But technology isn't simply about delivering the same thing faster and more efficiently. Great technology drives behavioral change. Now, taking a deeper look at the insurance industry as an example, we commissioned a study with Forrester to see where insurance providers rated themselves in the digital transformation journey. And one question we asked was, what is driving your company to go digital? As you can see, the number one response was customer experience. You can go out to Geico and get a quote in 15 minutes. And this type of experience is driving change in the insurance industry, especially with companies that have been in business for over 50 years. And second, though, was getting actionable data out of their IT systems. And I'm going to touch on this some more because it speaks to that modern data center. Another question we asked insurers was, what changes have you made to your infrastructure to become more digital? Over 60% of that reported that their company is somewhere along the journey to digitally transform their infrastructure. While meeting rising customer expectations is the primary driver of these transformation efforts, as we saw in the previous slide, insurance decision makers are also driven by a need to advance internal processes that ultimately touch customer experience, including driving better data insights for the customers, streamlining business processes like claims and underwriting, and improving customer satisfaction metrics. As seen here, most insurers have modernized platforms or data center environments that they own. However, in a close second or third, almost 60% innovated front-end customer applications and started to use more cloud-capable infrastructure. These changes are really a testament to the reality of digital transformation today. It's not about throwing away all the old existing systems and starting fresh, but rather finding a balance between legacy technology and emerging cloud and analytics platforms. Successful organizations are spreading IT across multiple areas of the business, removing the traditional single central IT function, and engaging with service providers who have developed multiple offerings that allow your IT team to deliver the right workload on the right platform. A quick story, when all a CIO has is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But a CIO with a comprehensive toolkit provides an independence to address different situations. So, for example, leveraging public cloud when it makes sense. That toolkit is partly technology that is developed, but a significant element of the toolkit is culture. Having multiple tools is only of use if the underlying culture supports change and transformation. A successful CIO needs to engage across technology services and the business and create a relationship that allows ease of movement between platforms, with the change being driven by the business needs and not the technology limitations. Now, while going digital is a necessity, moving all applications to the cloud, we know is not realistic. IT teams must focus on upgrading only the applications that are critical to customer experiences. These are the applications that provide essential data to customer journeys, that define and manage the products customers buy, or that manage the processes that guide the customer journey. Okay, while that was a lot, now why should this audience be interested? If you were a CIO, where are you going to invest your time and money? Operating systems that enable you to manage end user expectations, or systems seen as legacy? The current day IBM iOS has the features a CIO needs to run the business applications and extract data that enhance that customer experience. So keeping IBM i systems up to date allows an IT team to use it in the same sentence as other OSs that are driving change in the data center. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper in the tech stack. We have found that automation has played a key role in delivering both end user experiences and better data insights that were the top two needs in our study. Starting in the lower left, these are the basics, where you do a little bit of automation of tasks on your IBM i system, but correspondingly, the impact to the business is low. Now, as you go up the ramp to the right, we go into integration of these standalone systems into other systems that help make efficiency gains and lowers the costs to the business. But as we get near the top, we are starting to do data center-wide orchestration and automated work. And finally, at the top, we are interacting with web portals, integration with systems outside the data center, where data is acted upon by other internal teams, again, all in an effort to enable better end-user experiences. Interconnectivity of systems is how to enable that end-user better access to IBM i data with the tools that they want to use to access the data, such as a browser. All right, well, we have our first polling question. Let's see where everybody's at in that automation ramp. We have those 4 categories I showed to choose from. Are you only automating within your IBM iOS? For example, job scheduler. Are you automating IBM i with other management tools such as event, ticket management, and some monitoring? Have you started orchestrating IBM i with other data center automation tools such as Chef or Ansible that integrates with other systems? And finally, you have a full integration of your IBM i system, using web portals and automation tools, such that IBM is seen as similar to other OSs in your data center and even public cloud. Let me switch over to my survey mode. All right, I see a lot of real-time statistics. Let's give it another 20 or so seconds. Get to do our own little study here, so this will be interesting. Seen a fair amount of change. Good distribution.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and send these results out to the audience.
Okay. Okay, have they been sent out?
Yes, yep, they're you can go ahead and speak to those.
So a fairly good distribution. Not too surprised about A kind of being the main one. I was hoping to see a little bit more into that B side for those A folks. Happy to see what's over in that last column. So a fair number of people, more than I would have thought, are already making their way and really doing a lot of great integration of their IBM systems with really the rest of the data centers and giving some really great value back to the business. All right, so now we're going to have a slight change of pace and focus on IBM, but as it relates to what I have talked about so far with CIOs and the modern demands placed on them. So I've worked not only in the IBM world, but the Linux world as well. And we used to have a saying that beige was bad in the data center after HP bought Compaq. If we had beige servers in the mid to late 2000s, we knew that they were old Compaqs. And this was just our bad perception of those systems simply because they were more than a few years old. Now, I know there is a lot of love out there for the older names, and we still hear AS400 I-Series, and I even hear System I at times. But the perception is that these are old systems, and though they may run important work that are critical to the business, they are not going to be in the plans of a modern data center. So if you're running IBM, refer to it as IBM, and start educating others that these systems are up to date and can continue to run the important workloads that run the business. So when you talk about IBM, again, refer to it as IBM and not one of the older versions. If others are referring to it as older AS400 or other versions, politely state it's called IBM. It starts with us to change perceptions and advertise its modern OS features and its OS release schedule. And then per a recent help system survey, about 82% of IBM users are at least 7.x. So that's okay, but it's not. I would say it's still not great. We have, and I have to say, 52% of you, 7.1 is getting old now too. So when looking at more recent versions, only 35% of us are at 7.2 and 3. Even with APIs, modern day management and automation systems, they want to communicate with modern day OSs and may not work with the older OSs and certainly won't be officially supported. So what's keeping you from upgrading? We already know about its great hardware features and that the stuff just runs and keeps critical business applications from going down. Where the same can't be said about the other OS platforms, that's for sure. Applications will typically upgrade just fine. The benefits of staying up to date are not only increased capacity and performance on new power hardware, but interoperability with other management platforms increases. Remember back to the polling question, that ramp going up to the right. Modern day OSs will help the CIO achieve the integration with tools and platforms they're looking for and enable them to be to get to that upper right. Steve will. He will tell you that the future roadmap is there for IBM, so keep upgrading. Not to make it sound like that was an advertisement. IBM is definitely not paying me. But I do hate to be a little bit all doom and gloom. It's pretty obvious. New management tools will integrate and automate on a best effort basis with older OSs. The more obsolete technology you have, the harder it is to maintain and interface with new systems and equipment. There's also a direct business impact. Obsolete technology leads to increased cost of maintenance while increasing your inability to adapt systems to new and changing business requirements. This makes it a much easier decision for the CIO to re-platform when architecting for future data center needs. Well, you might say, Steve, money still matters. Yes, that's true. And when making investments in the future, or when looking to upgrade or to compare against re-platforming on other systems, the entire total cost of ownership needs to be taken into consideration. Don't forget, re-platforming has its own costs and cause for concern. Currently on IBM, you have the benefits of a stable application platform versus the cost of a redesign. So keeping a system up to date helps negate that need for a redesign. Depending on your situation and those current challenges that I had back on one of the first slides I showed, there are a few items to look at to help build a TCO analysis. First, IBM has a nice TCO calculator to help compare power systems to x86 alternatives. This is a great place to start, but you really have to do your own homework and compare the entire TCO. So it's more than just hardware and software. There's the number of people needed for both solutions, floor space, power consumption, as well as all the replatforming and transition costs to compare against. Now, there's also CapEx versus OpEx options. Maybe you don't want to own the hardware, or you have trouble affording the upgrade, or you don't want to be the OS admin. Going back to that challenges slide again, where you might be people or CapEx constrained and want more of a cloud solution while still retaining full control of the application. This is where a service provider can help. As an example, we recently helped a manufacturing company upgrade from V5R4 up to 7.2, where they reside in our IBM i Cloud environment. So we own and maintain the hardware and OS while they focus on the application for their business. Okay, now that we've worked on upgrading the OS and the platform, let's go up the tech stack. I've talked a few times about integration with other systems, so this is where APIs come into play. As an example, when I talk to my internal software development team about integration or integrating new products or tools into our web portal as well as our Ensono MO platform, the first words out of their mouths are, can I see the API list and the data that you're trying to extract? Because it's the APIs that allows for easier integration of tools, it's to be that great enabler for climbing that automation ramp we had the polling question on. Now, you don't need to be a software developer to be able to work with APIs. For example, my monitoring tools team uses APIs to integrate our management tools with new clients' ticketing systems. And they have done this, they could do this in under an hour simply because of APIs. These guys are great engineers, but they're not developers. So engineers shouldn't shy away from using APIs. So Steve, you may ask, how do I get started on this great digital transformation and integration journey? You have to give your dev and tools teams a backlog of work. It's really that simple. Take the initiative. It's up to us to evangelize the uses of IBM i and change the perception from a legacy system to a modern operating system and platform. Back on the survey, we had about 40-ish% of us that were still on that first rung where IBM is kind of a standalone and not well integrated with the rest of the environment. We need to be proactive in working with these other IT teams and integrating IBM i with the rest of the data center and the tools used to give those, again, great customer experiences. So going back to our Forrester study, when IT leaders were asked, what are the most important IT changes your company can make to create better customer experiences? The number one response was improving application performance. This is why keeping your IBM i systems up to date is so important, because it can directly impact your customers' experiences that we are trying to enhance. Once you've done this work, you've unlocked the power of your IBM i data, thereby giving more value to your business, and you become the path to digital transformation that is being demanded of CIOs. So if you're not doing these improvements, you're missing out on reducing costs with automation, along with infrastructure optimization, with tools that talk to each other for event correlation, bringing information back to that end user when they need it. Winners in the digital economy, they know how to innovate. They understand that a good idea isn't enough unless you have the technology and tools to put it into action. What you've done now is modernized and optimized your infrastructure, but really you're only halfway there. You've laid a great foundation to now enable your application renovation. This is where my partner Chris takes over to discuss your application transformation. Chris?
Thanks, Steve. So, modernization, applications. I'll start off by saying that modernization means something different to everyone. I've engaged with hundreds of customers over the years, and I can tell you that each story is a unique story. Each journey of modernization is a unique journey. And why is it unique? Because each company is really in a different current state situation. In other words, the nature of the apps that run the business, the health of those apps, the perception of the apps by the business, how well they meet the needs of the business, the user interface layers, the technology components, the state of the code base, they all tend to be varied and unique from one place to the next. Also the destination, what people are trying to get to and why they're trying to get there. Are they trying to integrate more packaged apps? Are they trying to retain the value in their bespoke systems? What technology bases do they want to get to? Do they believe in as the future for their organization? And then, of course, how to get there. What does that journey look like? We don't encourage the thought that modernization is a project. Modernization is really a journey, and it's comprised of a number of different steps along the way, some big, some small, and again, each journey is unique. So when it comes to the drivers of modernization, really we encourage the thinking that there's two views to this, and they both really have to align. Most IT professionals look at modernization and application renovation as a technological task. We look at it as improving the code base, changing the database, improving the database, making it more meaningful, opening up access, improving the user interface is always a hot topic, enabling mobile technology. Those are all technical drivers. Really what we need to do is also consider the business drivers. So depending on who's kind of first to the table to discuss the problem, we hear different things. So from the more business-oriented folks, we hear concerns like agility. How fast can we implement change? How fast can we get to the market? How fast can we implement new features? How fast can we integrate the merger of another company? Reducing training and onboarding time, lowering costs that ultimately increase profitability. So how do we get more efficient? Innovating beyond competitors, being first to market, enabling new channels of access, new revenue streams, merger and acquisition integrations, compliance with a variety of different regulatory standards that may affect various companies and organizations. These are all business drivers and reasons to modernize and improve applications because of these things. The technical drivers, as practitioners, which I suspect most people on the call are, we're used to seeing these terms. We're used to seeing new graphical web interfaces, mobile access, reporting and data management, big data, innovation efforts, integration with web services. These are all technological terms. In order to truly create a modernization strategy and sell it to the business and get the business to buy into it, these two things have to align. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the slides. So I want to provide some samples, and I'm sure you guys over the course of time have seen many different examples of modernization. So let's just kind of level set a few of these. So there's simple modernization, which is really around the user interface, providing a new UI to the business, to the users, potentially to partners, to enable access to new channels. All of these are good reasons to overhaul and refresh the application. And there are products that can do this very simply, that can overlay on top of existing green screen or 5250-based applications and beautify them, enable them to look a lot better, even improve a bit of the workflow behind them. And this could be to increase customer retention, improve employee satisfaction, increase productivity. Again, a number of things that can be gained from this type of improvement. A second type of improvement that we're seeing more and more is just enabling better access, new revenue streams, access to channels and partners and suppliers. And a lot of this is being done through the web today. And we see this where quite often the existing applications that have been built for the back office for internal users are often not structured well enough to go out to partners and suppliers, let alone consumers. And so we see quite often people wanting to build different kinds of application portals that access information from an organization. So for example, e-commerce portals, we see that a lot in the industry. And these are built as typically net new applications that plug into existing code bases and databases, either through direct data access or web services or a variety of technologies we'll talk about later. And these are often built in open source technologies. And this is a case study here of a customer who did this because they wanted to improve their competitive advantage. They wanted to prop up a site and be able to sell their solutions online and compete with the Amazons of the world. And in that world of retail and competing online, more than just a web presence, mobile is becoming more and more proliferate and predominant in terms of the type of access and interfaces you have to be able to provide. Beyond that, again, mobile access, here's another case study. This one is much more around field enablement. So this customer had a number of field reps that were out on the road visiting customers, selling their wares, in this case, large size machinery. And they would basically, talk to a customer, figure out what they wanted, and they'd go back to the office and see what's in stock and then call the customer back. And so there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of wasted time, not having direct access to what's available and when. And they very quickly, and in a very quick period of time, enabled the existing application to be delivered through an iPad interface and enabled their field force with iPads so that now when they're in front of a customer, they can just look up the inventory and they can reserve inventory directly for the customer in real time. And they measured the savings as 3,500 hours saved per month of wasted effort. And this is across a user base of 175 users. And this took them 10 days to implement this. So the technology is there to implement this rapidly and to enable really dramatic change in the business. And of course, these are kind of extreme cases that people love to showcase because they show dramatic results. But the results can be everything from simple transformation to very large scale impact and transformation. The next case study the last one actually I wanted to show you was, again, a more dramatic result. And this is, again, the UIs you can play with here, but in the end, this is transforming the code base. This is where, a customer wants to go as far as saying, I want to get rid of my older code base and I want to modernize that code base. I want to bring parts of it into new language technologies and transform that, or I want to bring it to the latest standard of RPG-free format and ILE. The number of customers we talk to that still have RPG 2 and 3 and System 36 compatibility stuff still hanging around the environment is quite substantial. So modernizing code, modernizing the database, modernizing the user interface, and just revitalizing the application, and in some cases even rethinking the application. So the spectrum of modernization could be everything from GUI enablement to add-on applications that web enable things, to mobile enablement, all the way through to this example, which is complete code transformation and application transformation. And again, each journey is unique, and the reasons and the business drivers for each are going to be unique as well. So at this point, I'd like to maybe switch over to the polling question and maybe ask you guys for some input in terms of where you're at with your modernization initiatives. So the question being put to you is, where are you at with your IBMI application modernization? And the answers we'd like you to comment on are: we have a strategy and a plan, good thing, or we have modernized the green screens, and we've gone that far, or we have built new web and mobile applications. Again, this is multiple choice, so choose all that apply. So we've built new web and mobile applications. Option D is we have fully modernized our RPG, COBOL, or sign-on applications. And letter E is we really have no idea where to start and probably need some guidance on how to do that. So wait for a few minutes for some of the answers to pop in, and we'll see where everyone kind of lands. Okay, so we're seeing some values come in here. Interesting results. As more and more of these come in, the bars kind of change quite a bit. So I'm not seeing the trends are coming in, though. I think that first option in terms of having a strategy is there.
What do you think, Chris? Should we go ahead and launch these to the audience, or do you want to wait for a few more to roll in? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I think that's good because I think they're kind of stabilizing now. So the pattern that we're kind of seeing here, and again, this varies a lot from from one survey, I guess, or from one group of audience to another, but this is somewhat consistent. So I see that more than half of the audience, or roughly half the audience, does have a strategy and a plan. So that's great. We're also seeing that 20% of the audience roughly has gone as far as GUI enabling their applications, and then building web and mobile applications. That represents about a third. And then in terms of fully modernizing the code base, really not showing a lot of activity there amongst the group. And then again, a lot of people, looks like a third, is really kind of seeking where do I begin? And then that's a very common question, and we're going to tackle that subject in the second half of my section here. So great. So let's flip back to the slides, and I'm going to go off and continue on the presentation. So one of the key things here, key enablers for modernization, is open source. It's important to note that a lot of these new things that people are doing, in terms of web and mobile and graphical enablement and transformation and code bases, a lot of that is enabled through open source technology. And IBM I is a very modern platform. It does offer the majority of these open source technologies. All of these and a number of other ones are all enabled on the platform. And that really provides a lot of options for people to extend and build new things in languages that were designed to enable those new capabilities. So PHP has been around for a long time, and we see Node.js kind of picking up. We see a number of databases like MySQL and MariaDB on the platform, and a number of other enabling technologies. But what's key to this is that you need to kind of make sure you're being up to date on your technology stack. So just to kind of refresh people's memories, version 7.1 of the OS came out in 2010. So that's 7 years ago. So if you're still running on that, it's a 7-year-old operating system. And of course, 7.2 is 2014, and just last year, 7.3 came out. With each new release, and even the interim releases and patches that come out in between, there's always new refreshes being done to the open source technology stacks, and IBM continues to invest in a lot of enabling technologies. So on this next slide, you'll see a number of these technologies kind of itemized. So things around security, improvements around database and data access, and JSON implementation, for example, a number of different open source technologies and tools and languages. Again, all have come out with these incremental releases. And even going as far as enabling the latest technologies like cognitive computing, artificial intelligence, and Watson, all these things are better enabled with the latest versions of the operating system. IBM is investing today in terms of how to enable IBM I shops to integrate with artificial intelligence. And I've seen some very impressive demonstrations and presentations from IBM recently on this topic. So the technology is there to be enabled today. And I think you guys will, as you explore Watson and cognitive computing, you're going to realize how transformational that can be for your business, the same way the internet was for many other businesses. So again, enabling technology is new operating systems. Keeping up to date on the latest refreshes of the OS is a key kind of critical step to that, and investing in open source. So let's switch tracks for a second, and we're going to move on to business value creation. This is a really important topic because in the end, IT projects do not really get funded, and technologies do not get invested into without a business case. And so it's important that as we think about modernization, we're keeping a sharp eye on what this is going to do for the business. How does this create value for an organization? And so we talked earlier about modernization meaning different things to different people. And from the IT perspective, often it's technological. And we talked about people having different goals and different destinations and different journeys. If there's anything I want you to take away from this is, what does it mean to create value? How is value defined? Value is typically defined in one of four ways. You're either improving efficiencies for an organization, so you're saving and reducing costs, right? So you're saving money, that's number two. Number three is you're enabling new capabilities, which in turn, typically, hopefully, are tied to enabling new revenue streams. So we're either enabling new capabilities to help and improve the organization, the user, make people more efficient, enable new features that the business needs or that marketing wants or that sales and order processing wants, whatever that happens to be, or we're enabling new revenue coming in through new channels because we're putting up web portals, we're doing mobile access, We're improving the ability for others to do business with your company. So keep those in mind as we think about business case development. Now, I want to provide you some practical examples of that. So each of these technology enablers that we see on the left side can be translated to business value creation. And creating business value, it needs to be measurable. So we talk about creating this value, but we really need to try our best to put numbers against it, to measure the difference and measure the impact and model the impact. Because people will invest in IT projects if you can demonstrate a clear formula of how this creates meaningful numbers to the company. So, for example, user interface, UX, and workflow optimization. So investing in GUI and workflow improvements, well, this will increase user productivity, reduce potentially the workforce and the size of the workforce. So we think about that case study before with 3,500 hours saved per month. How many bodies is that? That's potentially a reduction in the size of the end user pool used to do that particular job task. Faster onboarding of new employees. How fast can we get people up and productive? Millennials are used to web and mobile interfaces and those kinds of workflows. Less training is required. A common complaint we hear, trying to teach new people, especially millennials, how to use a green screen is very time consuming. Database improvements, easier access to data. So we have, and typically most databases on the IBMI are still those DDS databases with short cryptic names and a non-relational definition at the database level, and that's hard to get access to. Most requests for reporting and data have to go through IT. How do we change that? How do we enable better access to the database, enable self-service reporting and analytics, and improve data integrity and data quality? If we implement mobile, what are we really doing? Well, we're potentially improving the client and partner satisfaction. Or suppliers. We're increasing revenues by enabling new channels. We're increasing user productivity and client self-servicing. A couple of other areas, surrounding and extending. So building those add-on applications. Why are they being built? Well, and again, enabling new channels of access for partners, suppliers. Innovating beyond competitors, being first to market with something new in your space that your competitors don't do yet. Enabling new ways of doing business or adding on functionality to address missing automation and missing capabilities today. And finally, web services. We implement web services as a means to connect things. But why? In the end, it's an enabling technology, but what does it enable? It enables access to partners, suppliers, and other consumers. It enables web and mobile application integration, and it enables integration with other systems to streamline operations and ultimately reduce costs. So we need to build the business case. We need to identify we're doing these modernization initiatives. They are going to have this kind of impact to the business, and how do we develop a formula to measure that and provide a business value model for it. So how do we get this done? Well, a lot of ideas there, but in the end, where do we start? So part of this, it's going to be on multiple fronts that you have to tackle this problem. Part of it is a bit of training and reskilling. We have to learn some of these new technologies. We have to learn the open source technologies, and we have to start experimenting with them and getting our heads around that. If you haven't played with Node or PHP or web development or mobile development, well, hang on to your hats because artificial intelligence is around the corner. So yet some more technology to learn. So if you haven't started in the open source stuff, you're a little bit behind the curve, and we need to kind of brush up the skills and get some retooling going. Strategy and discovery. Leverage the knowledge of others. Other people have done this before. They've invested in these technologies. They've felt the battle scars of doing things the wrong way. There are organizations like Fresche that can help guide you in terms of helping develop a strategy and setting you on the right course and investing in the right technologies and not trying to learn this by shotgun, but being more surgical in the approach. Of course, solutions and software, you'll need technologies to enable this. Some of this will be open source, some of it might be commercially acquired. And finally, app services. So you may not have all the bandwidth and all the skills to pull these off. So how do you do that? Do you invest in hiring companies to build these things for you, or do you invest in bringing on people to backfill the day-to-day maintenance while you and your lead teams or you and your knowledge experts, development experts, go off and learn the new stuff and build the new stuff for the business because of your business knowledge? So this is kind of the enablers. We enable these new investments in modernization with training, with strategy and planning, with softwares and tools, and with people. But in the end, let's focus on how we get started. So there are a couple of ways to get started. This is kind of a simple framework where we just say, let's just start something. Now, we don't want to start anything. We want to be somewhat, we want to have a bit of a plan, a strategy. What are we investing in and why, and how does that make sense? But in the end, it does often require a different approach. I would say that new developments, all of them nowadays, if you're building something new for the business, you probably want to think about things like agile delivery models and invest more in learning and adopting and experimenting with agile. What you'll get out of that is a much tighter integration between business and the IT. So what this does is it enables you to engage with users early. You want to think different. You want to think outside the IBMI. What are other people doing, in the world of IT? And how are they doing it? What technologies are they using? And how do I do that on the IBMI? Then you want to focus on user experience. How does this feel to the users? So unlike in traditional RPG programming, we might have focused on the logic in the back end, and the UI was the best that we could do with the limitations of a green screen. In this new world, you want to focus on the UI first. You want to focus on workflow and user experience first, and you want to build the back end to support that. You want to create quick wins. Don't try and boil the ocean. You're going to do a business intelligence project, start with something small. You're going to do web enablement, start with something small. You're going to do mobile, start with something small. Create a quick win and build on it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, adopt Agile. For larger initiatives, you'll need something a bit more sophisticated. And so what we have here is a framework that we've used over and over again. It's a proven framework whereby we establish and set strategy. So we're looking at the portfolio of apps, the entire apps that are on the I or beyond. We're looking at the modernization. We're developing a modernization roadmap. We're scoping the changes that need to be done. We're doing planning and budgeting. And more importantly, on the bottom right here, we're focusing on the business case. So how is these initiatives, this large initiative, going to create value to the business? What is the business case? How will this be funded? Who is your sponsor? So it's important when we do these bigger projects, we focus on a few things. We focus on identifying what is the business case? Who cares in the organization? Who are the executives that will be most impacted by this change in this modernization? And how do we engage them early, solicit their input, make this their project, give them a sense of ownership into this initiative? And ultimately, again, how do we measure the outcome, measure the success? How do we establish those measurements up front, and how to make sure we report against them as we go? So again, those are all kind of key steps. So we covered a lot of technology. We covered a lot of some case studies in terms of how you do this. We covered the enablers of how you get there, and we covered the business process. So what we want to do now is maybe I'll end off my session, and I'll turn this back over to Steve to kind of close us off. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, our goal here today was to provide some insights where you can go back and start creating your own goals on implementing your IBMI strategy for the modern data center and that end user. This was a two-pronged approach where you really need to do both the infrastructure and the application modernization to achieve that viability and really optimize how IBMI and your apps are used in the business because ultimately it's the impact of the business and that end user that matters. Okay. All right. So now we have some time for some questions still. Janine, how are we looking for questions coming in?
We have some questions, Steve. So I'll kick it off. First question. I want to stop management from replatforming, but I feel like it's me against them. How do I build that TCO? Okay.
Well, I'll take that one. All right. Well, first, it's not impossible. Let me tell you, I guess, what I do as an example. When I look at comparing vendors that might be in one of my products, I'm pretty open with internal delivery teams because everyone always seems to have, a favorite vendor, and I want to gather different ideas too. I think this is the only way to do an assessment and compare against replatforming. you need to make sure it's open, fair, and really an apples-to-apples comparison. Get everybody to fill out the same spreadsheet of costs and be sure to include hours to architect a new solution where your hours might be to architect an upgrade. Get all the hardware, the software, the consulting costs, especially for replatforming, because ultimately the finance team cares more about that than they do, honestly, your labor hours to do the work. Anytime they need to write a check is what really interests them. But most importantly, you need to ensure that you meet all the business goals by staying on IBMI. Obviously, that's a must. If you could do that, then the rest becomes more of a financial review. So if you can meet the business needs, it may come down to which solution costs less and cause also less disruption. So an accurate TCO is essential. Just make sure you gather all the upgrade and replatforming costs, because that's where I've seen people forget about labor still matters, the hardware, software costs, all that matter. You don't want to leave anything on the table, or if somebody has bad assumptions. That's what's critical. You want to get that apples-to-apples comparison and say, this is what I need to do, and this is what a replatform is going to cost as well. So I hope that answers their question.
That was great, Steve. I'm going to jump to this next one because it's a little bit in the same vein. Any suggestions on how to balance the day-to-day and find time to modernize? We're so busy maintaining the system and supporting users that we never have time to do it.
Yeah, this is Chris. I could probably answer that one. So I think that's one of the challenges that we brought up earlier. You have a lot to learn in the end to get into these technologies and to get into these enablers. And again, I mentioned two choices. You can either bring on, or there's two choices. You can bring on new staff. You could potentially bring on new skills. You could outsource some of this work. I think those options don't really enable and empower the existing IT professionals to evolve and develop their careers and leverage their business knowledge. Often a better strategy is to backfill the day-to-day, by either engaging new resources to do the maintenance or to even outsource that, and to pass some of the day-to-day maintenance off to an application outsourcer to enable the time required to have the existing developers invest in their skills development and building the new functionality. So that's kind of what I'd suggest for that.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Next question. Would PHP be a preferred language to modernize? Is there such a thing as a preferred language, guys?
That's a great question. I think PHP is a great language, and we see a lot of people using that on the IBMI because it's also, from an RPG developer's perspective, it's probably an easy technology to get into. There's enough similarities. If you get into something as broad as Java, for example, some of the challenges of Java is there's a lot of frameworks out there and there's a lot of things to learn, and sometimes it takes a while to build skills. A lot of big enterprise, high scalable enterprise applications are built in kind of more Java, using Java reference architectures and stacks and frameworks. But also you see an emergence of other great technologies coming on the IBMI, like Node.js, for example. So Node is a wonderful technology because it enables programming in the back end that's based on JavaScript, which is often the same stuff using the front end. So you have a smaller skill set to learn potentially, and you can leverage that skill set for front and back end development. So I wouldn't necessarily focus in on just PHP. I think you really need to kind of assess some of the technologies that are out there, the tools that might come with them, and experiment with them a little bit before you go off and choose the one that you want. So Node has a lot of usage in the market today, in the IBMI market, but you'll see very quickly Node is going to pick up a lot as a preferred back-end language technology on the IBMI, is what my prediction is.
Okay. Here's one. How do I discourage management on comparing speed of data entry on the green screen versus slow mouse and graphics iteration?
It's a great question. Steve, it's okay if I jump in and answer that one? on
go ahead.
the UI front. So so UI enablement. I mean, part of the things you want to make sure is when you consider doing web enablement or mobile enablement, that you think carefully about workflow and performance. A lot of the technologies that just enable web for an existing green screen application do continue to support the keyboard entry approach, so you don't really have to switch to your mouse. So I think it's a careful consideration in the interface considerations of what you're building to consider, is there going to be an impact to data entry, and if so, how do I mitigate that? So often the keyboard strokes that the users would have learned are going to be retained in some of the simpler solutions that can be implemented. The other thing to think about is the applications today were built on the constraints of a green screen application, and therefore to do a business transaction from end to end, sometimes you're jumping through 8 different screens to get there. In the web world, you would have orchestrated that much differently. You'd have one web form, and you might have pushed all your fields that are most commonly used on the front form. You might have also done your navigation differently and have navigation customized per user role and allow users to pin favorites and things that they're always in onto that front. So some of the technologies that enable the web enablement are going to give you end user workflow optimization and performance improvements to the end user because of the mouse and because of the interface changes you can enable. So I think it's a question of showing some real examples, and that's where maybe talking to a vendor is going to help to say, here's what we can do to enable what you have. More importantly, here's what we can do to improve over what you have.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Gosh, I think this next one might be a little too involved. I'm going to scoot to this one. We've been looking at modernization options and finding there are a lot of different solutions out there. How would you go about determining which solutions are the right ones, and where would you start?
Yeah, I can again see if I can grab that if you want, or I'll give a statement. You can grab one too if you want, or take a shot at the answer. But there are a lot of solutions. There's a lot of different products and tools and technologies, and where to begin. I think this is where obviously the web's going to give you only so much. You're going to do a bit of research from the web, but in the end, you're probably not going to get the answers that you want or need, and you're not going to get guidance. You're going to get opinion, and you're going to get vendor statements. I think talking to people who have experience is key, and engaging in a process of discovery or of learning, where you're learning from people's experience and talking to vendors. Vendors will give you a lot of information for free. They'll help you out. They'll show you case studies of what other people have done, and their objective is ultimately to help you narrow down what is right for you. So I think that's probably a good place to start.
Great, thank you. Okay, unfortunately, we are at the top of the hour. I just want to thank all of our attendees today for your participation and your great questions. Know that if we did not get to your question, someone will reach out to you via email. I also want to remind you, while we still have time left, for those of you who joined a little late, you can download a PDF of the slide deck by clicking on the Event Resources tab on the left side of your screen. And while you do that, I would like to extend my thanks to Steve and Chris for sharing their expertise and perspective with us today. Later this week, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to a recording of today's event to everyone who registered. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day.